Hey everybody, Jamie Kelly here. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Season 3 of the Approximate Podcast. Be sure to join our Patreon for only $5 a month to see all of Season 3's episodes in full HD video. That's patreon.com/approximate podcast. If you're already a patron, thank you so much for your support. And to everyone who's tuned in, we love you all. And now, on with the show. Kitty! Fucking stop it. God damn it. Fucking cat. Yeah, you. Oi. Scrapple. Stop it. Alright, cut. We're done. Fucking cat. God damn it. Holy shit. Cupcake Sinclaire. Cupcake!
Hi.
It's been way too long. It's been like 3 years since you and I have been face to face.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, it has. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having
We
me.
love it.
Even longer for me. God, the last time I seen you in person, I think was at Sanctuary in like 2017, like DomCon.
Yeah.
That was 18 years ago.
It's so great seeing y'all's faces and reconnecting again.
Absolutely. You've been on our list for, an age. It's so good to have you here. First things first, how you feeling? How you doing?
I am doing really well. I am sorry. I'm just going to forewarn you. There's probably going to be lots of puns here because I cannot help myself. So I am doing great.
We need it. We love it. We absolutely have to have it.
Love a good pun. Absolutely. Or a bad pun, even.
Absolutely. So I want to know, because we got to catch up. What have you been up to? I know it's hard to distill 3 years worth of stuff, but what's exciting going on for Cupcake right now, recently?
I think really just having a renewed focus for the way that I shoot, the way that I approach the industry, trying to also figure out my identity both within and outside of sex work, and just really cultivating that growth because, in isolation, we all had that time to reflect. And so I really kind of delved deep into that.
For the listeners or new listeners, fans that are already of you, people that are watching this through our Patreon, let's get a little bit of a background on you. What is it you do?
So I am a professional submissive as well as an adult model, as well as an adult fetish model, as well as a sideshow performer. I do lots of weird stuff, and I do lots of weird kinky stuff. So I really like exploring the aspects of that.
The kinkiest stuff.
We will eventually get into it, but this is one of the things that I've been so super excited about because Jesus Christ, what this person is up to, what this person does.
Yeah, we had Sarah on, and we just we had 4 minutes there. We were just yeah, she's the baddest sub ever.
Oh
she's
my God. Y'all are so sweet.
we were the most intense masochist I've ever freaking seen.
First, I got to ask, just because I mean, we've known each other for a little bit within the industry, but I don't know, I don't know an extreme amount about you. So, I want to learn. As I'm going to learn along with our listeners. Where'd you get your start?
So I grew up and lived in LA.
Born and raised?
Yes, actually. So
LA.
Just LA all my life. I guess it's still technically recently that I moved to Vegas, even though it's been, maybe 4 or 5 years?
About 4 or 5 years.
I feel like the last 3 years don't count, so I'm still a baby
yeah.
in Vegas. But yeah, no, I am a lifestyle kinkster, so I was exploring the local dungeon and, BDSM community out there. And there were certain clubs that I was going to long enough for parties that eventually I realized, hey, I can be part of the staff. I can incorporate this professionally as well. And then I was kind of able to grow from there.
So was this one of these things where I don't know, forgive my parlance, but were you like a late teens, early 20s, club kid, just exploring stuff, and then you found a way? I want to know how you got into it and what your interest was before you ever put your foot into the industry, and how did you graduate from a person of interest and maybe a person that had a hobby to somebody that is now actually a part?
Yeah, no, that's actually a great question. So here's the thing. I'm not very I won't say social because that makes it sound like I don't like interact with people. But when you ask about, okay, was I ever like a club kid? Theoretically, I wish I would have been, but the reality is I wasn't. Like the very first quote unquote club, bar, whatever I went to was all like dungeons and kink clubs and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Whether it be like Bar Sinister, whether it be Sanctuary, like that kind of stuff.
You went right into the kink clubs.
Yeah. See, so like I'm a professional dumbass, like through and through.
And then you found a way to make your fun into a profession.
Exactly.
Awesome.
Oh, see, because I always thought like, because I've experienced like sex clubs and dungeons and things like that, but it wasn't something that I didn't even know how to, because it seems like you got to know somebody to get into those kind of clubs.
Right.
So it'd be like I'd just go out bar hopping and then wind up in the dance clubs, and then maybe somebody that knows somebody hips me. They say, "Oh, well, you look like you're a sexual deviant. Maybe you want to get invited to this."
Right.
You just jumped right in. How did you jump right into these dungeons and sex clubs and things?
I just, I've always been a really big reader, and that sounds really silly, but like looking back at it, I was always reading different things, especially stuff that ended up usually touching on aspects of kink and BDSM, whether it was Marquis de Sade, whether it was, Anne Rice, Anne Roquel, or whatever her pseudonym for like the beauty.
Yeah, the Beauty and the Beast
Things
thing,
like
yeah.
that. And so, I especially came across, I believe it's Jay Wiseman's
Oh,
book
yeah.
about
S&M 101. Yeah.
Exactly. So I was reading things like that just because I love reading about different stuff, and I feel like if the tone of it is good, then like you can read about anything, right? So I was just doing that full fledged, and then I started researching on the internet, and then I realized there was a community, and so yeah, I straight from my teens straight into all of the craziness.
Wow. So how long was it between like you just living it to like your first, I don't know, quote unquote, quasi professional or actual professional gig? Was the like crossover immediate or gradual?
I want to say it was gradual, but I guess it quite wasn't. I believe I was about either 19 or 20 when I started working at Sanctuary.
So like a year and a half ago.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I'm immortal, don't you know? Like
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. So it's just one of those things where like everything that I get into hyperfixations, if you couldn't tell. So I'm just one of those people where I really like learning about everything to the full extent that I can, and then going out and practicing it as well as I can, and then putting everything that I've learned on paper to practice in theory and theory to reality and all of that stuff. So yeah, I don't remember whether it was 19 or 20, but I do remember that I celebrated my 21st birthday while I was working at the dungeon, because all the rest of the staff there were like so excited for me. They're like, yeah, let's go buy you a shot kind of thing. So I know it was definitely before I hit 21 for
Wow.
sure.
So you're working at this place. What were you working as? Were you just like a wait staff or?
No, I was a professional sub.
You jumped right into professional submission.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I know people in like lifestyle, and I know people in like, of course, like all kinds of sex work and, doing sex work and whatnot. I still don't quite like understand how the professional submission thing works. Like how do we make sure like is there like a list of clients that like are able to, see you or?
What we see on mainstream media, right? It's usually like the stereotypes of what people imagine like dominatrixes to be. And then, sometimes we'll get like shows where like they joke about switches, but like you don't really hear about like the pro subs and things like that a lot. So yeah, no, that's a great question. It's pretty much the opposite of being a professional dominatrix, more or less. All of the same services that a dom would offer, I offer the reverse of that, right? So if somebody is either trying to experience kink for the first time and they just want somebody one-on-one to show them because they're overwhelmed at a party and they don't kind of want all of that sensory overload at once, I can help provide that and help them get their like foot into feeling comfortable within like the kink community. Whether people are busy traveling and they're like, hey, I just don't have enough time to find a steady partner, but I have these, fetishes and kinks and things like that. And I'm here to help and stuff. So yeah, it kind of really runs the gamut. And so that's why I just jokingly go like, yeah, everything you would imagine like a pro dom to do, I pretty much do like the reverse of it.
So, am I hearing this right? Is like part of your job as a professional sub to kind of help smooth a new customer's way into experiencing that part of like that kind of lifestyle?
I would say it's about 50-50, right? Because I have definitely have people who were very new to it and didn't know where to start. And I've definitely had people who, are established members in the kink community and are like old leather and this, that, or the other. And, there's a lot of reasons why people look for professionals within the kink community. I'm not going to question too much, but yeah, I've definitely had people who are well, within the kink world and are just like, hey, I'm looking for this specialized thing. And, sometimes pick up play at a dungeon is a little hard and a little involved. So especially if you've got professionals, then why not,
Yeah.
I love what I'm hearing here, and I got a question, and it's not to bring up any kind of drama, but I'm super curious about this because this is this is the world I don't know a whole lot about. In your field as a professional sub, is there a lot of competition? Is there like do you find yourself like having to like climb a ladder?
I'm not the best at marketing and research analytics and things like that, right? Like I'm just a hoe. I just do what I do and show my tits, right?
I feel
so
you there.
you know what I mean?
Amen.
But that being said, I did realize while I was working professionally at my previous dungeon that there is a bit of a like it's a bit of a race thing, you know what I mean? So I wouldn't say it's competitive more so as like trying to fight against those types of things. And that's where it gets tricky and less so like, oh, there might be like 5 other pro subs in an area, at least for me. That's my experience,
In Las Vegas, is how different is it from LA as far as the culture goes? Do you find yourself doing a lot more of that kind of work in LA? Do you have a bevy of that same kind of work that you do in Vegas, or do you find that like the temperature's totally different and you don't do so much of that work and you have to do other things?
I think when I decided to move out to Vegas, I was kind of at a point in my life where I was also experiencing burnout. And because I have so many things that I kind of juggle under the sex work umbrella in general, I was very curious to see how much further I could go in terms of like digital mediums and things like that. So while I didn't stop offering sessions altogether, I definitely didn't try to remarket myself or bring over my LA clientele the same way like I probably could have and should have, just because the way that I was at, during that time period, I was like, I know what I need to focus on and it would do a disservice to clients not having my full heart into it.
I don't want to make any like presuppositions, but I imagine so you've been in Vegas for 4.5, maybe 5-ish years, right? What was the like impetus for you moving from LA to Vegas? I imagine I know what the answer is. Was it a cost of living thing or?
Oh, fuck yeah.
Yeah.
That was like the main
Yeah.
thing. That was definitely the main thing. The secondary thing was, I've noticed that a lot of my other adult industry friends were moving from LA to Vegas. So I knew that I would still have a community out here regardless. And yeah, I was going to save money on rent because fuck that.
Yeah, LA is just
It's a
ridiculous.
continuing thing that has been coming up on this season of the podcast with all the
Yes.
interviews we've been doing. The cost of living in LA. You can be 35, 36 years old living in LA and you still have to live like dorm style. You have to have a bevy of 5 or 6 22-year-olds that have to split rent.
I lived there for 4 years and I was pretty much homeless.
Yeah,
bouncing
you're
around,
like
bouncing around.
Yeah. It's definitely a struggle for sure. So, I know the whole popular thing is like, oh, don't, California, my Nevada or whatever. But I'm like, please adopt us. It's bad out there, y'all. We're in the trenches.
Yeah. So you moved a lot more into video work now. Like you've been doing a lot more of your own fetish clips and porn and stuff.
Is that a fair thing to say?
Absolutely, especially when the pandemic started. I wanted to mitigate as much risk as I could within the scope of my capabilities. So, if the headspace I was at when I moved out here was already video geared, then the pandemic sure didn't make sure that I was able to hone and cultivate that. So now I'm at a place where I can juggle both, fairly well and kind of get back into the same swing that I should have had back in LA. But yeah, no, it kind of felt like, more or less, I was like, okay, well, I was already on this track anyways, so what better time than now to really try to perfect that as much as I can. I've got a lot of time on my hands.
Yeah, I saw you finally shooting for insects. I was like, shit.
Oh, that was
So good.
that was ages ago.
Oh, was it?
Yeah,
Oh.
it's old. I just
Oh,
dug
shit,
up
okay.
old photos
Oh,
because
okay.
I was like, hey, look, I'm a baby. Yeah. Honestly, I can't even remember. It's been that long ago. I definitely more than 6 years ago. I can say
Oh,
that
wow.
for sure.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself that this might be getting a little esoteric? Do you find yourself like right now, like just to quote unquote, this is gonna sound shitty, but like quote unquote, stay relevant within the social media aspect of things? Do you feel like you're up to stuff that doesn't necessarily warrant posting what you're up to right now, and instead diving back into your old like bucket of photos when it was all about looking a certain way and like recycling those things to like fill a gap?
I think it was one of those things where I've got a bunch of hard drives, and so I'm constantly shuffling through those, and I just came across them, and everybody has those days where they're just not feeling too good about themselves, and so especially discovering those old photos, I was like, hey, yeah, I have done cool stuff.
Wow, I am hot. I've done
Yeah,
cool stuff.
exactly. Like I have worked for insects once upon a time, aeons ago when the dust was settled. You know what I mean? Like, so it was just one of those things where like I like to intersperse those older things between my newer things just to kind of not only remind myself, but also show people the variety of what I do because, I'm sure a lot of us have had multiple, like Twitter, for instance, accounts deleted and suspended and all of that jazz. So just, I try to make sure that anybody who's following me, especially within these last couple of years, still have an idea of what I do and aren't caught by surprise
Get a
or
grasp of the
underestimate
vault.
me. Exactly. Yeah.
I tell you, it does actually work. Pragmatically, it does work because there's always a fresh set of eyes that they have no idea that the thing that you posted was a 10-year-old picture.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
There's always somebody getting a new credit card.
When I first met you, I believe it was this weird, very weird thing. Trans erotica, about 3 years ago, they were doing a little experiment where they had a model house that was like, it's just all webcams spread all over this
The
house.
trans house, yeah.
Yeah, the trans house,
Yeah.
and the whole thing was to stream real life stuff and to have people open their wallets to
Kind of like the way Upper Floor was doing with Kink when it first came thing.
that kind of thing. And on its inauguration, I was invited to come over because I'm part of the trans erotica roster, so they just want to populate that inauguration with as many warm bodies as possible. I believe that's the first time I met you. I came in, it was a party atmosphere, and I think that's where I first met you. And I say all that to say this. You were accompanied by somebody that I was familiar with. I don't know any more soft way to say this, but you opened your mouth and I saw this thing with your tongue, with the cleft tongue. You have a cleft tongue.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And as long as I've been in this industry and as long as I've been in my 20s, part of the club scene and the fetish scene and all these things, I've rarely ever seen that. So it took me by surprise. And I think I asked you a question that I felt stupid asking because I didn't want to offend, because I'm sure you get this shit all the time with vanilla types that as soon as they see it. So where did that come from? And what was the decision there?
As I was going through my kink journey, I started also getting into the hook suspension community and the Venn diagram of the hook suspension community and
Body
the kink
mod,
community. Yes,
yeah.
exactly. So one thing led to another. Everything's kind of like a gateway, right? So I was in the kink community. I found the hook suspension community. I found the body mod community through the hook suspension community. And so, yeah, through that, I was able to become friends with I don't want to call them like surgeons, but the people who were facilitating these procedures and things like
The
that.
modders, right?
Yeah. 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 And so being able to like learn a lot more about like bloodborne pathogens and about how like, the body reacts to certain ways, especially for things that are, unconventional procedures. The tongue splitting especially just really appealed to me. So that was definitely a big interest for me.
Before the tongue splitting, is there like, it's just called that? Is there like a more delicate way to say that, or is there like a community way of saying tongue splitting, or is it just tongue splitting?
It's tongue splitting. If you want to get technical, like it's like bifurcation, like da 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 da. Like so, like if you want to like sound like hoity-toity, then yeah, like there's that. But like if you're just talking to the average person, it's a tongue split.
Doesn't have to be medical fetish.
Exactly.
Right.
That's right.
So before you like traveled down that road, were there any other quote unquote extreme body modifications that you had experienced before that, or was that your like first big one?
So the first mod that I got was I have a magnet implanted in the palm of my hand.
Ooh,
So
I want to hear all about that. What is that?
What does that do?
Mystery to me.
I have a magnet in the palm of my hand. It helps me with an extra like sensory experience. So especially like for instance, if you are using the blender or you're using the microwave, you've got a magnet in your hand. So it's just the same way as like if you would hold up one and you see how it vibrates slightly and stuff. And so like that's a major version of that, but on a more subtle connotation for it, it's really helpful because like it feels like low budget X-Men where like if I'm like stud finder kind of on the walls or if I walk through like an entranceway and I'm trying to like find like a certain type of like circuit for this, that, or the other.
Stud whisperer.
Exactly.
Awesome.
So yeah, no, between like all of the like electrical things and then like working with computers and stuff and how just maybe I dropped a bunch of safety pins and I'm too lazy to grab them one by one, I can just
So getting you near hard drives is kind of a iffy thing, right?
luckily, no, it's not that powerful. But there were certain. I used to work in an IT setting and stuff. So when I would deal with laptops, sometimes some of the older models, I would end up accidentally putting it to sleep because of the magnet in my hand. So that was definitely a learning curve for sure. But knock on wood, none of like the actual major electronics that I need to interact with have like glitched or anything. So.
We got a real life Magneto here.
Yeah, I'm a low budget X-Man. Like
That was your first quote unquote like extreme modification. Between that and the tongue cleft thing. Is that a good way to put that?
Yeah.
Okay. Was there anything else?
No.
Okay, so I'm so curious about this. So forgive me for sounding stupid. What was it about modification before you got the magnet in your hand? Like that kind of extreme mindset to make a modification. Where do you think that comes from?
Well, I think just being a lifestyle kinkster, at least for me personally, a lot of my journey is about rediscovering myself, about self-autonomy, about like trying to discover new ways to interact with the world through a different lens, right? So like, especially being like a pro sub, right? All of the amount of fetishes and kinks that you'll encounter like in a week or whatever and stuff like that, you learn so much about yourself. And so I feel like, especially when I entered the body mod community, seeing about all of the different mods that were out there and then analyzing how it made me feel in relation to my own life and stuff like that, it definitely gave me a big pull to certain procedures for sure.
And the tongue cleft was was the thing that made that was the next natural step. Awesome. So, but I say this. Have you done, because I haven't seen you in 3 years, has there been anything else besides the thing? What else have you done? If anything.
Well, so I have scarification on my leg, but I don't know if that kind of quite.
That's from a performance, though.
Yeah, exactly. And so that kind of overlaps in like the Venn diagram category. So I'm always like, or like whenever I'm like filling out model interviews and they're like, do you have tattoos? And I'm like, yes and no. I don't know how to answer this. So it kind of falls into that. So yeah, I have scarification. I have a brand. I have the magnet, the tongue split. Recently, a couple of months ago, I ended up getting my pussy pierced, which was nice because, I mean, that definitely is more like on the tamer side of things.
Like
but-
labia or clit or?
Well, I was going to ask this.
Yeah.
This could be something relatively benign, or did you get something like extreme?
So I was a dumbass. You guys got to remember, I am a walking professional dumbass. So
The
I am
cutest
in
one I've
no
ever
way
seen.
condoning, right? I'm like, hey, I'm doing this to myself. I'm gonna accept the risk. Let's go. But yeah, my partner and I, we were out in Croatia getting dental work. Oh, that was the other thing. I have a cupcake on my tooth
Oh, fuck yeah.
baked in. So that
Oh,
was fun.
awesome.
But that aside, one of our friends who lives out there is a professional piercer through like APP and stuff like that. And she had this display sitting there and it was just so pretty. And I had never really thought about getting genital piercings. My body doesn't quite react well to getting pierced, interestingly enough. So I was like, hey, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, at least I tried. So I got 2 labia, my fourchette, and my VCH. So yeah.
So there's a lot going on in there.
Oh yeah, and I got it done all at once, and then I had to do like the plane ride back to the States. So when I say professional dumbass, hi.
What trouble have you run into at the airport when you had all that done? Did you not like make it past the? Did you get hassled by TSA?
None of the magnet doesn't set it off, the piercings doesn't set off the thingy, but of course, me being fucking black does. So the second that they pull me over to the side and then they
Yeah.
start realizing I've got weird stuff, then it starts heightening their whatever and stuff like that. So it's like that initial like, why are you in Europe? Why are you crossing the Canadian border? Why are you? And then they like start,
Yeah.
doing their little swabs and
Swerve
wands and all
stuff,
that
yeah.
bullshit. And then they see like, oh, we're doing the wand, and what is that? And then you're like, oh, I'm not smuggling anything. I'm just a weirdo, and I'm gonna be late for my flight. Please, for the love of God. Like,
Can't I just be weird? I'm just
Exactly.
trying to get over there.
yeah. So luckily, my stuff doesn't set off the alarms or anything like that. It's just people's eyes
Racism.
being,
Yeah.
The eyes are
A
alerted.
big problem.
Did you get assholed by TSA?
So I gotta ask this. Now, Steph and I come from a place where, and we have varying degrees of, I don't know, I'll just call it hardcoreness. I've been in the adult entertainment industry as a sex worker and mostly as like, it's just basic porn performance. Little escorting here, little, working for studios, and not stuff that's like too quote unquote egregious. Stephanie has essentially the same kind of story I has, but she goes a little bit the quote unquote darker.
Yeah, the kinkier route.
And you have experience in the sex work industry, but you do things
A little
that-
darker than me.
a little more outside of the norm than Stephanie. So let's stop talking about sex work for a minute. I want to know about this sideshow thing. Because Steph and I have been online for ages and we see things that you're up to. But for the listening audience, what is this sideshow thing? We'll just call it that for now.
So the dungeon that I was working at, they would hold monthly parties, and so the staff were like sometimes invited to perform. So you would have your standard shibari, you would have your standard burlesque, you would have things like that. And I'm just one of those people. Like I said, I hyperfixate on shit. So I would hear the theme for a party, and I would just kind of let my imagination run wild. Or somebody would say something offhand, and I'm like, but what if we do this? And so the story of my scarification is exactly correlated to that. We had like a little cannibal themed party and everybody was like making jokes about like, oh yeah, we'll have deli meats and stuff. And I had a partner at the time who was skilled in doing those sorts of modifications. And I turned to him and I was like, hey, you want to do something fucked up? Like, and I, luckily the owner of the dungeon is so very open-minded and amazing because all of the dumbass shit, all of my notable dumbass shit has been in that dungeon on that stage, and she's been so fucking amazing about it.
Yeah, I think I've
So,
seen some. I've seen some body hook stuff from you on that stage. I don't think
mhm.
I was there for the leg eating.
Well, that's kind of what I was gonna get to. What introduced you to your first like it's I'm a dumbass.
Like, what was my
I'm
first
gonna call it
performance or
like hanging you
something?
up by hooks.
Mhm.
Well, it's suspension.
So yeah,
Mhm.
hook suspension. Yeah.
Um, so, one of my past partners was one of the few people who do overlap in the Venn diagram of hook suspension community and BDSM community. So he would frequent both of those. And so while we were dating, I ended up learning a lot more about hook suspension. And one of my birthdays came around and I was like, you know what? I think this would be like a great way for me to reset my body, for me to kind of let go. Like, this is a really big thing, obviously. And so, like, I should embrace this, especially during a time like this when it's my fucking birthday.
Mm.
And so it was really beautiful. There was like this park that overlooks like the ocean and stuff like that. And, you know, it was like a good collection of people. And some of them had been suspending for years. Some of them, it was their first time too. And everyone was so like well practitioned. And
Is that the Servitus bunch, or am I thinking?
an
Schmears?
offshoot.
Okay.
Yeah, it's Schmears.
Okay, cool. Nice.
Yeah. So that was a really nice cultivation because they had great bedside manner and also like they know what the fuck they're doing. So it was just a really good experience where I could just focus on my own emotional needs and not go, oh, is this sketch? Oh, is this what? Oh, like people were holding my hands as I was going up. If I was like crying, they were like checking. You know what I mean? So it was just a really amazing experience.
I'm gonna dive in deep because I'm fascinated by this. Because
Yeah.
I've never met somebody that does suspension, to my knowledge, in real life that like it's a part of their whole oeuvre, right? So, what was your first experience with suspension like? How were you hung? Who did you deal with? What was it like?
Yeah, so it was my past partner and his partner at the time because I'm poly, so we're all weird and stuff. But anyways, I did what in the suspension community is called a suicide. It's when you take two hooks in the upper back and you hang from there. And usually it's what they start off beginners with because it's kind of, I won't say the easiest on the body, you know, but just in terms of all of the complexities and all of that stuff.
I'm
and
guessing
you
that
don't-
there's enough flesh there
It's
to work with,
stretchy.
and maybe we should
Yeah.
say this for the listening audience. Like like,
Stretchy. The skin stretches way more than the average person realizes, let me tell you.
well, that's what I was going to ask. Like for the average listener who has no idea about this, the skin may be very stretchy, sure, but it's also very resilient.
Yeah, it's not like a ball sack that's gonna stretch and rip.
Is there a certain kind of hook? Does it go through a certain amount of like muscle and flesh? Is there a certain spot? Like that's all interesting to me.
Yeah. So if I were to go into all of those nuances, we would be sitting here for
I'm
2
sure.
hours.
Yeah.
Well, sure.
But definitely, you know, you've got things like Gelson hooks. You've got like there's all sorts of different shapes. There's all sorts of different sizes depending on if you are, you know, wanting to just stay in what we call a static or a fixed position, or whether you want to swing and jump around and spin like that. Then you adjust the number of hooks and maybe the way that they're positioned, which influences the type of hook you use. So it's like a whole thing. And then on top of that, a lot of people in the community are trained, you know, for medical stuff. for
EMT,
blood
yeah.
Exactly. So they also know what to look out for on that aspect. And so that cultivation of it is just so cool because once you know how to play by the rules, you start playing with how to break them, and you do team dumbass, and then you can go from there. So one of the suspension conventions that I went to, I did what's called an astronaut, and you hang by your ass cheeks, and that
Wow.
was, you know what I mean. So like little things like that where it's just like, okay, once you get a basis of understanding, then why not go forward with it? And I think that's always just my whole approach to life, whether it's BDSM or sex work or hook suspension. It's just, oh, I've got a layout of this. All right, let's just keep being a dumbass now. Like,
Let's go. How many miles can we get on this
Yeah.
body?
Are you with a troupe, or is it something that you lend yourself out to as
it's a little column A, column B, right? So I everything that I do on stage is me, you know what I mean? So all of the primary performances I was doing for Anarchy, for instance. I had the idea for the scarification. I had the idea for hook suspensions and breast nail. Like, all of those were my ideas, but also I'm fortunate enough to know people who know their shit in those aspects, so I can incorporate them in to help me execute that dream. And that's where, like, I really enjoy performing, because I might have like this very specific idea that fits a very specific theme, but being able to like cultivate the rest of that creativity with other people who have skill sets that I don't, and bringing that to life in front of people is always really fucking fun. So,
Collaborative synergy of it.
Exactly. Yeah. So if I get booked for events or shows or whatever, that's like fucking great and stuff like that. But yeah, back during the Anarchy days, it was just, hey, there's a play party going on. There's a theme. Somebody needs a slot for a performance. Oh, so-and-so like couldn't come out tonight. Hey, I've got a dumbass idea. Let's go. You know?
This is very interesting to me because I have another question for you. It seems like it's such a specialized talent, it's such a specialized like discipline. Do you command a high price point for that? Is the money good and hanging around?
So that's a very good question. I am fortunate that the partner that I am currently with is also a sideshow person who has been part of like Cirque du Soleil shows and who has been doing this for probably longer than I've been alive, you know? And so back when I was doing all of these crazy extreme performances for like Anarchy, right? Hook suspensions, flesh peeling, getting my tits nailed. I was doing this for free.
Oh, wow.
And also, in answer to your question, I am always constantly growing. I'm not the end all be all for knowledge, and being able to have this current partner who has been doing sideshow forever, who has done it professionally for like fucking Cirque and TV shows and all of this shit, having his insight to go, okay, what can you consider a buddy price and what can you consider someone trying to fuck you over, and helping me realize like where those boundaries can be, so that way I can better advertise, price myself, and also not lose my passion in the process.
Navigate that area.
Exactly. So he's been really helpful in that.
There is a discrepancy between artists and craftspeople, you know, and an artist, if they get to put a roof over their head using their art, has to become a craftsperson. And so, geez, Steph and I know it, and you know it.
Oh yeah, the
but
struggle is real.
figuring out the business, like living this weird outside of the center, like point of lifestyle, finding a grift in the system, and experiencing your art, and then also, oh well, no, I don't wanna actually get a job. How can I make this work for me? Then you got to figure out how to turn your art into craft. And do you find that the way that you've been able to capitalize on your art and on your personal inside passion, do you think the money that you've made, or that you've had to lend this passion towards craft and towards money making, has diminished your passion? Has it become a job?
So as y'all could probably tell by now, I dabble in a little bit of everything when it comes to entertainment and adult entertainment and fetish and stuff. And so when I was talking previously about how, you know, when I first moved to Vegas, I was like, let me focus more on the video aspect. So, you know, I do my shoots, I do my video editing, I do admin for other models, I do my sideshow, I do my sessions for clients, you know what I mean? And so I think that I'm fortunate that I am squirrel-brained enough where if I start feeling like my passion is being diminished in some area, then I go, okay, I need to put this on pause. I know I've got lots of other creative outlets. And hey, you know what? We haven't practiced sword swallowing in a while. Let's go fucking do that. Come on, bitch. You know what I mean? So it's really nice being able to bounce around like that. But also, yeah, when it comes to just paying bills and shit like that,
Capitalism,
boy, does
right?
it suck. Because I used to be in IT. And so every time I've got that light bill, I'm like, but at least you're not sitting in a cubicle, right, bitch? And I'm like, I guess, okay. Like, so definitely, I get it.
To be totally honest with you, this literal podcast right now, as we're doing this as a long-term project for season 3, this is the manifestation of exactly what you've been talking about. Steph and I spin a lot of plates. We're behind the scenes tech wonks. We're performers. We're sex workers. We do all these things.
Y'all are amazing.
Well,
Y'all juggle so fucking much.
and we do what we
Jesus.
can. But the whole reason that this is happening is because in real life, this is a manifestation of not allowing burnout to dictate our lives and putting our creative energy and just our energy as people into a way of like living a better life. And so, hey, we wound up in this like really cool position where, hey, how about we like further the podcast?
There's no
We
money
have
in
the-
it.
Well, yeah, there's little things behind the scenes. There's little things behind the scenes, but it's not a money driven
Yeah, it's
thing.
not.
Right.
Because
It's your passion.
our energy is towards creating art and towards, I mean, that sounds pretentious, but it's about taking the energy that we have and helping making like hopefully other people's lives a little bit better
Yeah.
by our creative output. And this right now, we're taking so much time to do this because this is the logical plate to spin because we were burning ourselves out on all the other things. We do this, we allow ourselves a lot of breathing room so that we can get back to the other things
Yeah.
that make some more money. So I absolutely understand where you're coming from. And again, I thank you so much for being a part of this venture.
Yeah, no, and I mean, especially being a creative type, we all have similar struggles and stuff. And so, yeah, the second that you realize how you manage your burnout and recognizing the signs that it's approaching, like, good on y'all for being able to go, okay, let's redirect. What else were we really passionate about that we haven't looked into for a while? 'Cause a lot of
Exactly.
people, it takes them years to realize that about themselves. So.
Well, and to be fair, it has. This is like
Yeah.
again, this is like the end result of having all those years of figuring things out and learning how to not have FOMO. You know,
Yeah, get
learning
past
how to
that.
like just
Oh,
space
yeah.
things out. You don't have to do everything all at once. Quality over quantity. You know, for creative folks, we want to do everything, but you gotta parse it out,
Exactly.
and that's what's going on right now.
Focus
Yeah.
on channeling that energy into like those things that you want to achieve that are part of your creativity.
This is gonna sound really reductive, but I keep on saying this. It beats flipping burgers. You know,
Of course.
Not that there's anything wrong with flipping burgers if you're paid enough to do it, but it beats flipping burgers.
What were your role models in this like
Ooh, I like this question.
performance? That like who did you look up to, or
So
did you just kind of take off running like like right from the front?
So for my sideshow work, actually, my current partner was one of the people that I looked up to, and we had never formally met each other. But because the circles run so small, there were a lot of hook suspension conventions, a lot of events, a lot of stuff where we should have met and we never got around to it. So when I finally ended up meeting him, it was like, this is the moment I've been waiting for, and I was fangirling and stuff like that because he does do a lot of very similar acts to the way that I do my acts and stuff like that. So if anybody would understand the process that I have for my performances and all of the skewering and craziness and that and stuff like that, I knew that he would get it, and he absolutely did when we sat down. So being able to like meet that role model was really cool. In terms of the kink community, there was this one woman that I worked with when I first started working at Sanctuary. Her name was like Caddy Compson or something like that. And she was like this really heavy masochist. She did pony play. She was so fucking cool. You know how like you're like in high school and you're like sitting in the corner and like the group of cool girls walk by and you're just like, I can never talk to you, but I love everything about you. She was that for me. And every time I would go up to her to like say something, I know I sounded like unhinged because I was just like, But yeah, she was the sort of person, she would do lots of really heavy performances the way that I do and stuff where like, she would get whipped to the point of bleeding and then drink her blood on stage.
Wow.
Or, she considers vomit play romantic if you're both eating ice cream because it comes up soft. Like that kind of shit. And I love her so much. And I don't know where she went off to. I don't know if she retired. I don't know what the deal is. But every time I do some fucked up performance, I'm just like, hey,
Always in
raise
your
my
heart.
glass to you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And she doesn't even, she's like, who the fuck is this weirdo? But yeah, so.
I love that. I love that because it just seems to me from the outside looking in that you found like a poetry in somebody's performance that like nobody else will get, and it like became a part of your heart.
That defined you, right?
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
And what other people might consider like, ugh, on the surface level, you're like, no, dude, I get it. I understand what that shit is. And
Right.
I want to be that. I want to do that.
Yeah, because I mean, my stuff is extreme, but I feel like in any aspect of just existing, we all have that moment of, wait, you can do that? You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
for me, mine just happens to be like on the more extreme side. But yeah, I think it's definitely a very human thing where like you come across something, and especially when you're looking for that creative inspiration or whatever, and you come across it and you're like, wait, you can do that? And so, yeah, that's really nice.
I fucking love it.
It's your egg cracking moment.
Exactly. Yeah.
Guys, we are literally we're at that point, but we have enough time. We always kind of try to put a bow on it with 3 questions
Okay.
for our guests.
All right. Suck it to me. Let's go.
The 3 well, it's one question in 3 parts. Okay? And the question is, what advice would you give to somebody coming up in the industry? 3 pieces of advice. From your perspective, where you're coming from, what 3 pieces of advice would you give to somebody that's up and coming?
Maybe I'm a little biased because I mean, we clearly see I'm a weird, pedantic, hyperfixated person. But I think my very first one would be research, because that's always my tenet to go by, right?
Very
so
important.
I'm always like, hey, the more you research, the more that you're able to navigate sticky situations, which, you know, for me in the kink community was like a lifesaver, because if I didn't know the foundations, then I would be in very unsafe situations, right? So that's the first one.
It's a form of self-care.
Yes, absolutely.
So research, number 1. What's a second piece of advice that you'd give?
The second one, I think, would be, as corny as it sounds, trust your instincts, trust your gut. Whether you are worried that something, you know, oh, I hope this isn't too cringe. Be cringe. It's okay. Oh, I don't know if this person is safe to work with. Don't work with them. Maybe circle back in a year and see what happens. You know what I mean? Like, be gracious with yourself and your feelings, and, you know, don't try to like push through them or suppress them one way or the other. Like for me, the main reason I got my tongue split was because I always felt like I was biting my tongue and I wasn't able to fully express myself, right? So like, especially when it comes to things like sex work, where like you have to be on top of the situation. You have to know what's going on around you. If you're feeling very passionate about something, do it. Digital decay, you can delete stuff. If you don't like it, you can, you know, there's like a couple of videos that like I didn't like when I was first starting shooting, and then I just redid versions of them, and then I'm like, hey, look how much I've grown. Or if you're like, hey, I don't know about this person, but I can't put my finger on it, they just give me an ick.
I love this idea of trust your gut. That has to be first and foremost. But if a mistake is made, it's okay. So long as you know that it's not the end of the world, you simply learn from that mistake, because at least you went in knowing to trust your gut. It's not the end of the world. It's not going to fuck you up. It's just a mistake. We all make mistakes.
Well, I think we talked about this with Marshall. We said the best part of doing all this stuff is learning where you failed. So you can always
Absolutely.
better yourself.
So number 3.
Just to circle back to that other one, no, that's exactly why I was like, I don't want to make that my number 1, because yeah, I feel like especially once you have enough research, just like you were saying, once you have not only research, but that like experience, then you can definitely go from, okay, I'm not sure what situations to really trust my gut about, to, okay, well, I have researched this example and maybe something similar like this has happened in the past, and now I can make a decision about X, Y, and Z. So anyways, that was my just like, yeah. But the third one, I think, as once again, corny as it sounds, is definitely community. Sex work is so fucking stigmatized. And, you know, I'll say it time and time again, like, we can talk about this all day, but unless you're really working within the nuances, the average person just might not understand. And even then within sex work, there's so many different umbrellas. So everyone's perspectives and experiences are vastly different. So even if you're trying to connect in a way, then, you know, you have to realize that you might not. So building community and finding like a group of people where like, you know, you can spitball ideas off of, you can share video editing tips with, you can, you know, have someone vouch or research for you if you don't know any better. Like, all of those sorts of things. And also just because like having friends is nice. And I think as adults, it seems like a lot harder to do. And somehow it becomes like this non-grown up thing to want friends. But you know, touch starvation is real. Isolation is real. All of that.
Support systems are really important.
Exactly. Thank you. That's what I was trying to articulate. So I think that would be my other thing, because it can get really lonely if you don't try to nip it in the bud. Because God knows I'm guilty of that. I will hermit and hermit and hermit, and then I'll get like booked for a gig, and then I'm like, I need to rebuild my social muscles. Oh, fuck. So
Yeah.
Completely identify
Yeah,
with that.
exactly.
I isolate
That's-
myself, and I'm like, I don't even remember how to conversate with people anymore.
Yeah. So that's why I'm like, community is so important, because like, you know, people like Sarah, you know what I mean? Like I'll like fucking get sidetracked, and I might disappear for a week, and then she'll be like, hey, we should hang out. Let's edit our videos together. How are you eating? And you know, and I'm so fucking grateful for people like that in my life, because it's not a bad thing to want to interact with people and have a buddy system for things like this.
She said something about you. She said y'all two share a brain.
Yeah. Honestly,
really
she's
close.
like my little like twin sister, and I love it because like no matter how long we go in between like not talking or whatever stuff like that, the second she texts me about some shit or shares a meme or whatever stuff like that, we're just like that, the same shit, everything.
If you can find a compatriot, a common soul, you know, foster that relationship, foster that friendship. Just even having one person in your life, I mean, it goes so far to
It
help
makes
you
such a difference.
live a more peaceful life, to make better decisions. You know, if you find that, yes, absolutely foster it. Jesus Christ, this is like one of the best 3 pieces of advice I've heard on the
Fucking
podcast
absolutely.
so far.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I feel like they're all kind of stereotypical, but, you know, just from my experience, I know that if I had known that when I was younger, then I definitely would have been able to maybe grow a lot faster and be more confident in myself, I guess I would say. So, yeah, I'm always harping on those because I'm like, it might sound like something cringy and eye-rolling, but, like, no, listen to me. Just find a buddy, do your research.